Well, it's technically right. What you do, technically, the Treasury borrows from the open market, and then the Federal Reserve buys that debt from the bondholder, puts money into the economy, and takes the debt back onto the books of the Fed. So it's no longer owed to the public. The debt is now owed to another unit of the government. But what happens is the money supply has gone up. So it is printing money to finance the war. The problem with that is that, again, you can do it to an extent, but if you do it too much, you get inflation. And in 2021 and 2022, we had a blowout of the money supply. I've been a monetary economist for 43 years, I mentioned, international. I never saw it. In fact, it never happened before, such a large increase of the money supply. And then you start having inflation. The first inflation was that every crazy cryptocurrency soared in value, and then the stock market soared in value, and asset prices soared in value, and non-fungible tokens soared in value. But then it got into the commodities markets. Now it's getting into the real, you go to the grocery store, it's into the real economy. And so that's what happens when you print trillions of dollars, which is what we did in 2021, 2022. So you can do it. It's just that you have consequences when you do it. Don't do it and think you're going to get away with it just completely printing money. Lots of governments have tried that for actually a couple millennia. It's called debasing the currency. And you can do it for a little while, but after a while, you better pay your bills. That's the basic point.
Thank you. For those of you who just tuned in, I'm Marcy Winograd for Code Pink Radio. I am with the distinguished Jeffrey Sachs, economist, public policy analyst, who's been doing this for decades, talking about this debt crisis of anywhere from $24 trillion to $31 trillion, and the betrayal of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who promised that he would not deliver a blank check for military spending. And yet, all talk of cutting the military budget has suddenly evaporated during this period in which he is negotiating with President Biden and demanding cuts in Social Security and Medicare, food stamps, and so forth. Jeffrey Sachs.
I wish we heard Biden saying, well, at least we'll cut the military budget. I'm not hearing that either. Neither of them.
No. Now, Jeffrey Sachs, let's say you're in the White House. You're in the Oval Office.
Hard to believe.
I'm going to put you there right now. And you're meeting maybe with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, and you say, look, this is out of control. This is a debt we have. We need to cut the military budget, slash it. What are you going to cut in that budget?
First thing I'm going to say, God, we thought we were going to bluff Putin and so forth, and just NATO enlargement was going to go on, and he called the bluff, and now we're in this ridiculous, horrible, tragic, destructive, expensive war. We're going to tell him, okay, no NATO enlargement, you go home. In other words, we're going to negotiate the end of this, which started with these provocations of overthrowing a neutral government and overthrowing the sanity of not moving NATO right up to a nearly 2,000-kilometer border with Russia and all that. So I would stop the war through negotiation. That would be the first thing. We'd save a lot of money. Second, I would say, look, we just had the accounting by SIPRI, which is the Stockholm Institute that keeps track of who spends what on the military. The United States is spending more than the next 10 countries combined. And I'm talking about China among those countries. We're spending 3 times China's military spending. We're spending more than the next 10 countries combined. Let's get this under control. Then I would point out that we have 800 military bases abroad. China, 1 or 2, depending on how you count, maybe a small one in Djibouti, maybe 1 or 2 others. We have 800. Okay, we don't need 800 for our security. It's not adding to our security, it's adding to our debt enormously. So let's get this under control. Let's take out an Excel spreadsheet also and do this right. Real numbers, not gimmicks. Let's see what we need to do in taxes, because God, there's so many loopholes here that it's unbelievable. But at the same time, let's stop waste on the, not just waste, tragic spending on the military industrial complex, because that is where we have wasted so much of our money.
Yes, and when we create, I don't like that word, it has a positive connotation, but when we produce, or the military contractors who are really making a killing off of killing, when they produce new weapon systems, these systems emit tremendous greenhouse gases. So there is that connection. And too often we see environmentalists and peace activists operating in silos. And at Code Pink, we have a War is Not Green campaign because we think it's essential that we integrate these campaigns, because the military is a driver of the climate crisis. The Pentagon is the single largest global institutional emitter of greenhouse gases, consumer of oil and fossil fuels, and too much of that is under the radar. So let's talk about it. Now, let's also talk about what we're doing at Code Pink.
Great.
This week and next week. We have grassroots activists on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, Medea Benjamin, Olivia DiNucci, who many people met when she disrupted. Well, she's disrupted a few times those powers that be that insist on all of this never-ending spending for the military, including Joe Biden. So anyway, they're going to be on Capitol Hill with others, visiting key lawmakers' offices and saying, look, this is our petition. Code Pink is a partner in the Peace in Ukraine Coalition, which represents over 100 organizations. We have a petition calling on Biden, Putin, and Zelensky to support a ceasefire and peace negotiations now. And I thank you, Jeffrey Sachs, because you are one of the prominent signers of that petition, along with others such as Noam Chomsky, Daniel Ellsberg, Dr. Cornel West, Ann Wright, Jack Matlock, the former ambassador to the Soviet Union, even Roger Waters, the co-founder of Pink Floyd, has signed that, as well as Dennis Kucinich, one of my heroes, who was in Congress for many years and a great peace champion. So we are taking this ceasefire petition not only to offices on Capitol Hill, but also fanning out across the country to deliver it to congressional offices, along with a full-page ad that ran in the New York Times last week. Thank you very much, Eisenhower Media Network. And this ad said, let the United States be a force for peace in the world instead of, well, I'm adding this now, instead of a force for war and destruction. There are those, however, Jeffrey Sachs, there are those who disagree with this call for a ceasefire. They think it's controversial. They say, no, we cannot have a ceasefire because then Russia, Putin would end up with this annexed territory in the Donbass and in Crimea. Whether that was an annexation or reunification is certainly up for debate. What would you say to them?
I think it's really important to get to negotiations and to understand the roots of this war. This war came because we kept pushing NATO. And at the end of 2021, Putin put on the table, actually, you want to avoid war, here is a draft Russia-US security treaty. And it had several points, the most important of which is stop the NATO expansion. And you know what the White House said? No way we're going to talk to Russia about NATO expansion. That's our business. It has nothing to do with Russia. Of course it has to do with Russia. We're about to put NATO right up against the Russian border. And so this was calamitously misguided foreign policy in the United States. And it's not just me saying it. The leading American diplomats have been saying this for decades now. Don't do this. George Kennan, William Burns, who's our CIA director right now, warned about this in 2008. And William Perry, who was our Clinton's Secretary of Defense, nearly resigned over Clinton deciding to enlarge NATO because Perry was saying, we're going to start another Cold War with Russia. So it's possible to negotiate. But it's actually been, strangely enough, the United States that has absolutely rejected diplomacy. Americans probably couldn't believe that. But it's actually true, and it's at least two recent occasions. One is at the end of 2021, when Putin was putting a diplomatic initiative on the table, and we said, no, we're not going to talk about it. NATO enlargements, none of your business. That's what we told the Russians. And then at the